Tonight's stories are all centered around hauntings within the family, from homes where multiple relatives experience something they still can't explain, to chilling encounters that happened around the exact time beloved grandparents passed away. These are three allegedly true stories shared by people who lived through them. Tonight's first story comes from Alex. Alex says, I don't have many memories of my childhood or many memories of my dad, but one in particular has stuck in my mind, popping up every time I feel a strange sensation. That year, I was only 4 years old and lived in public housing apartment with my dad and mom. My dad had to stay home more because of an illness, while my mom was often at work. One day I was lying in my little bed, playing with my kid's tablet, smiling to myself for some strange reason. But that memory is so fresh that it feels like it happened yesterday. While I was playing, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a black figure in front of the door to the room, tall like my dad. At first, I thought it was him, but when I lifted my gaze, I saw that in the hallway, lit only by the light at the end of the corridor, the figure wasn't slim, but the only distinguishing feature was its long hair. Then everything else was black. At that moment, I froze. Even as a kid, I loved horror and the paranormal, so I thought it was just my imagination playing a trick on me. So I rubbed my eyes and looked back at the door, and the figure was still there. Clearly scared, I said quietly, Mom, did you come back early? The figure stayed there, impassive. Soon after, it started walking toward the living room at the end of the corridor. I don't know what went through my mind at that moment, and especially where I found the courage, but I suddenly stood up and stopped in front of the door, looking toward the living room, and I saw the figure clearly entering the living room and turning the corner. Trembling, I approached and stopped before entering, and clearly scared, I peeked from behind the door. In the total darkness, I could see the figure stop in front of an old TV. One of those that when you turn it on caused a lot of interference, or more specifically the same type used in the TV ritual, but let's not get sidetracked. At that moment, I was frozen with fear, but my curiosity to understand better what it was strong. I took a step forward and entered the living room. The figure didn't move an inch. I turned on the light, and the figure immediately disappeared. I stood there for a few seconds, dazed with fear, and then I immediately ran to the kitchen on the other side of the corridor and found my dad cooking. I told him everything, and one thing stuck in my mind from that moment. My dad's expression wasn't just fear. There was something more, like he had seen it too. From that day, for the next 3 years, my life was a series of misfortunes. The first thing that happened the next day was that I woke up with my first nosebleed. My dad's illness started to worsen, and I continued to see the completely black figure in the living room in front of the TV until I moved away. After that, I never saw that figure again, even though sometimes, even today, I feel like I noticed something in the distance from my new house. After 13 years since the incident, while talking about that strange experience in that house with my mom, she gave me some truly shocking news. I wasn't the only one who had similar experiences there. My dad and my mom had some too, and they really left me breathless, but I'll tell you about those later. The second piece of news honestly gave me chills. The building I lived in was situated over a huge old military cemetery, and this makes me think a lot that the figure that my parents saw and I saw was probably a nurse from the war years. With difficulty, they both went back to sleep, but something was still waiting for them the next morning in that room. The living room. That room had been named by my mom the portal because the strangest experiences happened right there. The house wasn't perfect, nor was it beautiful, but the fact that my mom and I still remember every detail so well unsettles us, especially me, since I only lived there until I was 5, after which we moved. But I'm sure of one thing, that figure isn't just connected to that house, but also to us. I hope my experiences help you express yourselves better. I can't wait to hear from others who, like me, have had these paranormal experiences that leave an indelible mark, but also give you a message not to forget. The paranormal truly exists. The person who submitted this next story wanted to remain anonymous. The story's titled, I Think My Grandpa is Haunting Me. Hi, everyone. So I just wanted to share my experience because pretty much everyone in my life doesn't believe in the paranormal, and I just need some support or advice. So to start the story of my experience off, this happened in late May of 2023 when I was 16 years old. All I remember is waking up around 2:30 a.m. and looking into my hallway from my room. Yes, I slept with the door open. First mistake. Anyways, I remember looking down the hallway from my bed and seeing a man who resembled my father. I wasn't freaked out by it at all because my dad normally is up and about throughout the night, but I decided to say hello to the figure. The moment I said hello, the figure faded away. I didn't really think much of it because I didn't care and wanted to go back to sleep. But I know for a fact before I went to sleep, I put Vaseline on my lips and then laid back down. Fast forward 5 hours, I wake up to my mom on the phone in the living room and then running to the bedroom. I get up and follow her in because who calls this early? My mom hands the phone over to my dad, and we are told that my grandpa, my dad's dad, has passed. Obviously, I'm heartbroken and stressed because he passed in my home state, Ohio, and I live over 32 hours away. So we ended up driving to Ohio, and there I found out what happened to him. From the coroner's point of view, he got up in the middle of the night around 4:30 and went to the downstairs bathroom. He threw up, stood up, and had what they call a widowmaker's heart attack. I live in Mountain Time and he lived in Eastern Time, so the times match up on when I woke up and when he passed. While I was in Ohio, I found a picture album of him and my grandma, and I came to the realization that the guy who was in the hallway was most definitely my grandpa, but younger. A couple months after his passing, my bathroom lights started flickering like crazy. It had not stopped in the past 3 years, even though we've changed the bulbs and checked wiring. I've asked my family, and the only time that the bathroom light goes crazy is when I'm around. Another thing that happened with my bathroom after his death is that I have woken up to my cat, who's normally very sweet and harmless, growling at my bathroom in the middle of the night. I've moved out of that house, but will be moving back next month. I'm scared to go back because I don't want to be haunted, to be honest. I don't know if I'm crazy or if this is a common phenomenon. Please help me figure this out. If anyone has advice, please feel free to share it in the comments. The person who shared this story wanted to remain anonymous. This happened about 15 years ago, and there are multiple experiences in this story. My great-grandmother was a beautiful soul. She had plenty of hardships in her life, but overall showed and ruled with nothing but unconditional love. She was an amazing painter. She loved reading, and she wore a silly bright yellow nightgown with pink flowers on it every time we saw her. She lived in Colorado, and so I only saw her once in a while, every few years, since my family lived in Georgia. In 2011, we took a long trip to see her, and it wasn't normal. Being young at that time, I didn't understand why she wouldn't look at me, or why she was in a different home, why she wasn't wearing that yellow nightgown and showing me her paintings. A few days after we came back home, she passed due to dementia. It was the most brutal thing I'd ever witnessed someone go through. The following month consisted of her son going through her things and sending items to us that was written in her will. I got her art box full of unfinished paintings and her jewelry box she's had since childhood. I didn't know at the time how these would change my life so significantly. For about 3 months, nothing happened besides grief, until her ashes were delivered to our home. Her son couldn't deal with the grief and said he felt like she needed to be with us. So my mom placed her urn in this huge bookshelf we had right beside her favorite books. I finally unpacked the jewelry box and placed it on my dresser and went through her art. That night, I had a dream about her. It was Christmas. She was in the kitchen with my mom, making breakfast, and my brother and I were playing with our freshly unwrapped toys. My great-grandmother went upstairs to get something, and then I woke up as I felt a hand touch my leg. It was warm, like someone was sitting on the end of my bed and gently placing their hand on my leg in comfort. In the morning, I immediately told my mom about the dream, and she started crying, stating that earlier in the morning, while she was making breakfast in the kitchen, she saw a bright yellow and pink blur race up the stairs. It clicked for both of us that it had to be that yellow nightgown. A few weeks later, my brother was having a sleepover at our house with his friends. The night before the party, my mom had a dream with grandmother and they got into an argument. She couldn't remember about what, but she woke up crying. She came into my room to wake me up so I could help with the cleaning for the party and told me about her dream. As we walked down the stairs, there were books all over the floor in front of the bookshelf. It was only the books that were directly in front of her ashes, only her favorite books. To check all possibilities, the books were at least 2 to 3 feet away from the bookshelf. The shelf her ashes were on was about 4 feet off the ground, and nothing else was even moved an inch. We stared at the books in such disbelief, as there is not a single thing to explain it besides my great-grandmother throwing the books. It was a floor-to-ceiling bookcase with a sealed back. We had a cat, but there wasn't a way for her to jump up and only land on those books without causing more chaos. As we started putting the books back, we heard a music box jingle playing upstairs. It was her jewelry box that was in my room. No one even knew it played music. I even opened drawers, smacked it around, tried to turn the crank, but no noise came out. Fast forward a few more months. My mom, brother, and I went on vacation down to Florida. The main objective was to burn on the beach and see family. But before we left to start driving down, my mom put grandmother's ashes in the car with us. Her reasoning being, her late husband was buried in the family cemetery in Florida, and we would bury some ashes with him so they could be together again. We get to Florida, do our vacation stuff, meet family, and now it's the last day before we head back home. The drive to the cemetery had incredibly heavy rain for the entire hour. We got to the entrance and it immediately stopped raining. The sun came out like it had never even rained. We started walking around, cleaning up the space, and just let the grief take us. After a while, I walked to the car, grabbed her ashes, and sat the urn on her husband's grave. Now, what I'm about to say is something I had a hard time believing for years. As I sat the urn on the grave, I sat down and kind of went into a trance. I felt like I had passed out, but I was still awake. I could hear very faint voices that grew louder until I could see my great-grandmother and my great-grandfather talking in front of a window. The window was an open wooden frame with a red swag curtain gently moving from the breeze. They were laughing, crying, and while I couldn't fully make out the words, it sounded like they were catching up on life. They hugged, and then my great-grandmother turned to look at me. I immediately got up, grabbed her urn, and walked towards the car. My mom asked me if I was okay and what is going on with me, but all I said was, "She's ready to leave." As soon as I sat down in the car, I passed out for real this time. My mom and brother ran to the car and started shaking me. When I woke up, I just looked at my mom and told her what I saw. I described everything, and she started bawling. I had described the window in their old house, and my great-grandfather exactly as she remembered it. I've never met my great-grandfather as he died shortly before I was born, and that house burnt down over 30 years ago. There aren't any pictures of the house either, so it's something I know I've never seen before. We sat in silence as we started to drive towards the gate. As soon as we passed the gate, the rain started pouring heavy again, all the way back to our hotel. Spontaneous rain is a daily Florida experience, but the timing of it all was very interesting. Since then, years have passed and nothing has happened. We still felt that she was around, but in the sense that she was in our hearts and found the peace to move on to whatever is next in the afterlife. That was until 2020. My grandfather, her son, visited us for Christmas. He stayed in my room for the week, and all was well. We talked about his mom, showed him all her paintings. We hung up around the house and overall just cherished the good memories. When it was time for him to leave, my mother and brother took him to the airport, so I was home alone. It was quiet in the house until I heard the jewelry box music start playing. I called my mom and told her to put me on the speaker because I had something to say to grandfather before he gets on the plane. I put the phone to the jewelry box and let it play. After it stopped, I told him that was his mom's jewelry box and that it hasn't made a noise in years until today. So yeah, that is the most profound experience I've had with the paranormal. Throughout my life, I've had smaller experiences and things I could explain away, but the experience I had with my great grandmother is something no one can explain. To this day, my family talks about this, and every time someone has a dream about her, we get the chance to relive the love she had for us. As an adult, the one regret I hold is not telling her how much I loved and admired her when she was still alive, but I think she knew anyway. And I spoke a little bit with the person who shared this story, and she mentioned that she and her grandfather are not as close as they used to be, but every once in a while they do exchange messages. And he's not a believer in the paranormal, but this experience definitely was hard for him to explain. And especially also another thing she mentioned was that in the cemetery, the occurrence there was definitely very otherworldly. And then finally, one last thing that she mentioned was that she has started to paint in honor of her grandmother, and she's finishing up some of her old paintings, and she's also started painting her own paintings. So I kind of felt like this was a good story to end with. It was a little bit of a palate cleanse after the other ones, and I hope you enjoyed those. Thank you so much for spending part of your night here with me. All of the stories shared on this channel are allegedly true experiences submitted by the people who lived through them. If you have a strange, terrifying, or unexplained experience of your own, feel free to send it in. And if you enjoyed tonight's stories, thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing, and helping this channel continue to grow. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.